Hey everyone, welcome to this video tutorial. In this video, we look at how to install PostgreSQL on Ubuntu 20.04. So to get started, log into your server instance. So with us here, we have Ubuntu 20.04, and to confirm this, we'll check the version using the following command, cat etc os release. So on line 2, you can clearly see that we are using Ubuntu 20.04, also known as Focofosa. All right. So the first step is to install the prerequisite software packages that will be used to download and install the software certificates. So to do so, first of all, update the package index. And to do so, you run the command sudo apt update. All right, so this takes just a few seconds to complete. Great. Now, the next step is to install the prerequisite packages as we've mentioned. So on your command line, run the command sudo apt install wget, then ca certificates, like that. So in our case, these packages have already been installed. All right, moving forward. Now, PostgreSQL documentation provides a well laid out step-by-step procedure on how to install PostgreSQL on various operating systems, including Linux. So what you can do is to go to Google and search for PostgreSQL. Then here on downloads, you can click on it. So this provides various avenues of installing PostgreSQL. So these are the various operating systems that are supported. All right. So in our case, we're going to click on Linux. All right. Then here, select Ubuntu, since this is the distribution you're going to install on. Okay. So this provides steps on how to install PostgreSQL from the apt repository. And as you can see, these are the supported versions of Ubuntu. Okay, and these are the supported architectures. So down below, you can see the procedure on how to install PostgreSQL from the apt repository. So the first step is to add the PostgreSQL repository. Okay, so I'm going to copy this command and paste it here. Okay, so this has executed without any issue. Then the next step is to import the repository signing key. So I'm going to copy this command as well. Then I'll paste it on the terminal and hit enter. Okay. Now the next step is to update the package list. All right. So I'm going to copy this command as well. And hit enter. So this synchronizes the new repository that we've just added to the system. So as you can see in these two lines, so we have updated the package index with the PostgreSQL repository. Great. Okay. So the next step is to install PostgreSQL using the apt package manager. And to do so, we are going to run this command here. So this will install the latest version of PostgreSQL from the apt repository. Okay. So I'm going to paste it here and hit enter. So this will install a wide variety of packages, including the PostgreSQL server, the client, and other dependencies. And this will take a bit of time, so be patient as the installation proceeds. Great. So the installation of PostgreSQL has completed. So we're going to check the version of PostgreSQL installed, and to do so, run the command psql-v. So here you can see that we have installed PostgreSQL version 15.4. All right. So now let's check the status of PostgreSQL, and to do so, run the command sudo systemctl status PostgreSQL, hit enter, and from the output you can see that PostgreSQL is up and running. All right, so up to this point we have successfully installed PostgreSQL. Now in the next step we will demonstrate how you can start using PostgreSQL using the PostgreSQL command line tool. Alright guys, now with PostgreSQL successfully installed on a Ubuntu server instance, the next step is to interact with the database server. Now before we move forward, the installation of PostgreSQL comes with a default administrative user called PostgreSQL. Now we must use this user to log into the PostgreSQL database for the first time. Now in order to do so, we are going to use the PSQL command line tool, which is the PostgreSQL client. And to do so, we're going to run the command sudo. Then we pass the -u flag to specify the user. So in this case, the user is Postgres, like that, and then followed by the PSQL client tool. So we're gonna press enter, and as you can see, we have accessed the PostgreSQL shell. All right, now PostgreSQL installation also creates a default database called PostgreSQL. So we have the client, we have the default user and the default database sharing the same name. All right, so before we move forward, let's first of all confirm the connection. So run the command / then /info. So this provides information about our connection. So you can see we are connected to the database Postgres as user Postgres. All right, so we have the default database called Postgres as well as the user. All right, so to check or to display the default databases, run \l. So by default we have 3 databases. So at the topmost row we have our Postgres database. All right, as you've just mentioned. Okay, now to view all the users in our database server, run \du. So by default we only have one user, which is Postgres, as you've mentioned earlier. Okay, now the user Postgres doesn't have a password, and it's always recommended to set it ourselves. So to do so, I'm going to run the command \password, like that, followed by the user Postgres. So I'm gonna hit enter, then I'll provide the password. So the password won't be displayed on the screen for security purposes. So let me now confirm it. Great, so now we have successfully set the password. So now let's create a database and interact with it. So in our case, we're going to create a sample database called test-erp, and to do so, I'm going to invoke the query create database followed by the database name. So in our case, I'm going to specify test-erp, like that, and I'm going to end with a semicolon. So our database has successfully been created, and to verify that, once again you can run the command \l. So at the bottom row here you can see that our database test-erp has been created. All right, now let's create a table inside the database. So we need to connect to the database first. So \c, and then the name of the database, test-erp. So you'll see the prompt, you're now connected to the database test-erp as user Postgres. All right, so now let's define the schema for our table. So we are going to have a table with 4 columns. Okay, so let's define the schema first before we add records. So to do so, we're going to create table. So the name of the table is clients. Okay. So the first column will be the ID column, and it will act as the serial key, or sorry, the primary key. So we'll define it as primary key like that, comma. Then the second column, we're going to have the first name, and then you're going to give the data type virtual. Then we have second name, or rather we're going to have the last name, which also takes virtual data type. And finally we have the role, which also takes virtual data type. All right, so you're going to end this with a semicolon. So we have the ID as a first column, first name as a second column, last name as the third column, and role, which will be our last column. Okay, so I'm gonna hit enter to execute the query. So we have created the table, right? Now, to double check that the new table has been created, we're going to run /dt. So as you can see, the table clients has been created. All right, now let's insert a record into the table. Okay, so to do so, we're going to use the insert query. So insert into clients, so insert into clients. Then we have first name, last name, role, values, so the first name we're going to call the user John, then last name Smith, and John is the CEO. All right, then we'll terminate this using a semicolon. Then I'm going to hit enter. All right, so to query the table, use the select statement. So select all records from the table clients. So as you can see, we have one record already existing. This is the record that you have already installed. All right, so we have logged into the PostgreSQL shell, it created a table, created a database and a table. All right, so now let's see how you can interact with the database remotely from a remote server. Now let's exit the PostgreSQL shell, and to do so I'm going to type /q to quit the shell. Okay, so now we are back to our command line terminal. Now by default, the PostgreSQL server is only accessible locally through the loopback IP address on your machine. Now we need to make a few changes in the PostgreSQL configuration file to allow remote access. All right, now to do so, we need to access the default configuration file. So to do so, run the command sudo vim. We're going to use the vim editor. So this is the file. So this is the path to the configuration file. Main postgresql.conf. So I'm gonna hit enter. All right, so here we are at the configuration. So we're going to look for an attribute called listen addresses. So I'm going to search for this. So I'm going to press // then type listen. Okay, so be sure to locate the listen addresses attribute here. So I'm going to uncomment this. Okay, so this is set to localhost. Now, to have PostgreSQL listening to all the available IP addresses, I'm going to delete this, and I'm going to specify an asterisk. So this will set PostgreSQL to listen to all the addresses. All right. Now we're also going to, all right. So now let's scroll. You make sure that also the port is listening to port 5432. All right. So we are going to save the changes and exit the configuration file. All right. Now another thing we need to do is to add a new connection policy. So to do so, we are going to edit the PostgreSQL access policy configuration file. So once again, you're going to use the Vim editor. So the access policy configuration file is at PostgreSQL 15 main, then pg hba.conf, like that. So at the very bottom, you make sure that you add this connection policy. So here we have host, then all, and then for the IP address, you're going to set it to listen to all the IP addresses. So to do so, you're going to specify 0.0.0.0/0. Okay. And for authentication type, we are going to specify MD5, like that. Okay, so what this does is that it allows TCP connections to all databases for all users using any IPv4 address using MD5 encrypted password for authentication. All right. So we're going to save this as well. Now to effect the changes or to apply the changes, you're going to restart PostgreSQL. And to do so, I'm going to run the command sudo systemctl restart PostgreSQL. And just to make sure that the system is listening to port 5432, I'm going to use the SS utility. So run this command, then grep to search for port 5432. Great. So you can see that our system is listening to port 5432. All right. So we are doing everything okay. Now in the next step, we're going to see how you can connect via a command line tool from a different server. So now let's try to initiate a remote connection to a PostgreSQL server from a different or a remote client. So first of all, we need to check the IP address. So to do so, I'm going to run the command IPA. So you can see that this is the IP address of our PostgreSQL server. All right. So now I have another terminal window opened. Okay. And just to be sure, you need also to have PostgreSQL client also installed on the remote tool. So I'm going to confirm the version. So as you can see, I have PostgreSQL version 15.4, all right, installed. Okay, so now we're going to connect to this, our server, from the remote system. And to do so, I'm going to run the command PSQL-H. Then we'll specify the IP address of our server. which is 173.82.235.16. Okay, then followed by the port number, which is 5432, and then the database name, which we gave or specified as test ERP. And then finally, you're going to specify the user, which is Postgres user, like that. All right. So I'm gonna press enter and see. So here we are prompted for the password for the PostgreSQL user. So I'm going to specify the password, then press enter. And as you can see, we have finally landed or connected to the remote database, which is test ERP. Okay, and let's check the connection. So once again, conn info. So you are connected to database test ERP as user Postgres on this host, all right, at port 5432. Okay, and we can list the tables once again using the command dt. So here's a client's table, and we can query the table for the records. So select from clients, and we can see this is the record that we had earlier or added in our previous step. All right, so we are good to go. We have successfully connected to our remote PostgreSQL server from a remote client. All right, so now in the next step, we're going to see how you can connect to the database via an application code using a database driver. Now we're going to attempt to connect to the database remotely via an application code. Now I'm going to exit from the database by pressing \Q. So we are back at our remote system. Now you can connect to the database using your application code, but to do so, you need a database driver that will allow you to do so from your chosen programming language. Now we're going to demonstrate this from Python, and to do this, we're going to install the standard PostgreSQL driver for Python. Now we're going to use pip package manager to do this. So first of all, you need to install pip, and to do so, run the command apt install python 3 pip. So we are doing this from the remote system, and as you can see, pip is already installed. Now to install the PostgreSQL driver, we're going to run pip3 install. Now the driver is called cyclepg2 -binary, like that. So I'm going to press enter. So this installs the driver. Okay, so this has successfully been installed. All right. So now I'm going to write a simple Python code. So I'm going to access the Python shell. So to do so, I'm going to run python 3. So I'm going to import the driver cycle pg2. Then I'll hit enter. Then I'll connect to the PostgreSQL database on the remote server. So conn is equals to cycle pg2 dot connect. So here I'm going to specify the details of the PostgreSQL server. So I'm going to say host is equals to then the IP address of the server, which is 173.82.235.16. Next, I'm going to specify the port, which is port 5432. Then I'll specify the database name, which in our case is test underscore ERP. Then I'll specify the user, in this case Postgres. Then finally I'll specify the password. So here we have all right. So this line will initiate a connection to the database server. All right. So let me review the syntax and ensure it's correct. Okay, so I'll hit enter. Great. Now I'll open a cursor to perform the database operations. So cur is equals to con.cursor. I'll hit enter. Then I'm going to execute a test query, and to do so I'm going to run cur.execute. So I'll run a statement that queries the table. So select all from clients. So we should enclose this in double quotation marks. Then I'll press enter. Then I'm going to retrieve the query results. So I'm going to save the results inside a variable called records. So car dot fetch all. Then finally, I'm going to print the output to the console. So here I'm going to run the print function. So print records. Then I'll hit enter. And you see, there we go. So we were able to connect to the database and query the table from Python. All right, so we have seen that we can initiate a connection on the command line and also via an application code. So in the next step, which is our final step, we're going to see how to connect to the database via pgadmin4, which is PostgreSQL GUI client. Okay, so see you in the next step. Now in this step, we're going to install a GUI client that will help us to connect to the database and manage it. Now there are quite a number of GUI clients that are at your disposal, but the most preferred and the most popular option for PostgreSQL is the pgadmin4. So now we're going to install the GUI client, and to do so you need to go to the official download page for pgadmin. All right, so here we are. Now down below we're going to select the apt method. So we're going to scroll down, and these are the installation instructions. So I'm going to copy and run each of these methods. So the first step is to is to add the public key for the repository. So I'm going to copy this and run on the shell. So I'm going to provide my password. All right, that's done. So the next step is to add the repository. So once again, I'm going to copy this and paste it here and run. So this adds the repository and updates the local package index. So this should take just a few seconds to complete. Great. So now the next step is to install pgadmin4, and we're going to do so via using the apt package manager. So I'm going to copy this and run it. So this is quite a heavy package. So as you can see, it's around 548 megabytes. So to proceed, I'll press Y for yes and hit enter. Great. So the installation of pg4 admin is complete. Now back to our browser. So there's an additional step that is required. So now we need to configure the web server. Now to do this, we're going to copy this command and run it. So I'm gonna clear the terminal, then I'll run the setup script. So this will provide the guidelines. So the first prompt requires us to provide an email address. So I'm going to provide the email address, and this is the address that we're going to use to log into the GUI client on the web browser. So this will be admin at cherryservers.com. So feel free to provide your preferred email address that you're going to use to log in. So I'm going to hit enter. Then I'm also going to provide the password. Then I'll confirm it. So the script will continue setting up the web browser to host pgadmin4. Now we can now configure the Apache web server for you, and this involves enabling WSGI module. All right, so to continue, press Y and hit enter. So the Apache web server is running and must be restarted. For pgadmin4 installation to complete, continue. We'll say yes and hit enter. Great, so we can see that Apache has successfully been restarted, and we can now start using pgadmin4 using this URL. All right, so on our web browser, we will provide the IP address of our server instance, which is 172.82.235.16/pgadmin4, and we'll hit enter. So this will display the following login interface. So here you're going to provide the email that you specified earlier, and then for the password I'll provide the password here, and then I'm going to click login to access the dashboard. So give it a few seconds as the dashboard loads. So here we are at the PostgreSQL dashboard, and you can see it has quite a number of features. Now to connect to a server, you're going to click the add server icon. So here we're going to specify a name. So I'm going to call this my database. Okay, so now I'm going to select the connection tab. So here I'm going to provide the IP address of the PostgreSQL server, which is 173.82.235.16. So the port is 5432. So here I'm going to specify Postgres, and the username is also Postgres, like that. So here I'm going to specify or provide the password for the Postgres user. And then finally I'm going to click save to save the credentials. And there we go. So you can see we have connected to a database here. So you can collapse this. So when you click on databases, you can see that this is a database that we created from the command line test ERP. Okay, so yeah, so you can see let's check the tables. So you can see our clients table here, and over to this section you can see various metrics that are being displayed from the database server. All right, so feel free to explore and see other features that the GUI client provides. Okay, so this concludes our tutorial on how to install PostgreSQL on Ubuntu 20.04. It's been quite a long tutorial, and I hope this helps you to install and configure your own instance of PostgreSQL database server and access it remotely, as well as from a GUI client and also from an application code. So if you found this insightful, please leave a like, share it with your friends, and see you in the next video.